Hello, welcome everyone to this webinar on Cluster 2 Destination 1, Democracy and Governance. My name is Julie Baleriot. I'm a policy officer in DG Research and Innovation in the European Commission. And I will give you some information on the topics of the 2023 call. So this is for your information on top of the work program. The information that I will give you here is not legally binding. That's important to say. It's really to help you put together your proposal with the most information at your disposal. So we're going to focus, as I said, on the democracy and governance destination for the work program 2023 only. Just a quick reminder on Horizon Europe. So we are here in the Pillar 2 on global challenges and European industrial competitiveness, Cluster 2 being culture, creativity, and inclusive society. There are 3 intervention areas. I will deal in this webinar with the first one, democracy and governance. This destination answers to all of the Commission policy priorities for this mandate for the von der Leyen Commission, the 6 priorities, and you will see that in the topics that are presented today. Just also quickly, we are in the context of wider policy initiatives on rights and democracy. I invite you to have a look on the Europa website if you want to have some details about these policies and what are the different actions that are planned under them. There is the European Democracy Action Plan, the Defense of Democracy package that was announced in the State of the Union speech in 2022. The Action Plan on Human Rights and Democracy, which is more turned towards external action for the European Union, the Charter of Fundamental Rights, a Union of Equality, Gender Equality Strategies 2020-2025, as well as the European Security Union. Once again, I will not go into details in this webinar about these policies, but I really invite you to have a quick look, even if just a glance at what is in there and see how it can feed into your proposal. So the main challenges that we're trying to tackle with this call are that democracies are more fragile than in the past. There is an erosion in democracies. A growing number of countries are moving towards authoritarianism within the Union as well. And at the same time, there is a war ongoing on European territory. Russia has invaded Ukraine. This has been going on for almost a year. This has had an impact on the whole continent and on the world. And this has also shown that multilateral governance is under stress and needs to be further looked into to try and fix those issues. So what we've tried to do with this work program is to divide it into 2 sides. So there's what I would call a reactive side and a proactive side. On the reactive side, what we want is to facilitate responses to challenges based on evidence, scientific evidence. So this is more of a responsive side. And on the other hand, we have the proactive side, which is how can we strengthen democracies from within? How can we nurture them so that they are more resilient and work better for the people? The expected impact here is the one that's taken straight from the strategic plan. Another interesting read for you. The expected impact then is that democratic governance is reinvigorated by improving the accountability, transparency, effectiveness and trustworthiness of the rule of law-based institutions and policies, as well as through the expansion of active and inclusive citizenship empowered by the safeguarding of fundamental rights. So that's a lot in one sentence. Just read it a couple times so you have an idea of what we were trying to achieve with this work program. On your to-do list, very important. First of all, always take the gender dimension of research into account in your proposal. And by that, I don't mean just parity, gender parity on your team, but also take into account how gender can influence your research, the gender dimension that's present in it. We have a dedicated set of information on how to take into account the gender dimension. That's also called gender mainstreaming in Horizon language. Have a look at that. The second item on your to-do list that's going through all of the topics that I will present today is that we encourage clustering and cooperation between the selected proposals. Of course, you don't know yet who will be selected. We don't know yet who will be selected, otherwise it wouldn't be a competition. But what we want to say is that be aware that for each topic, there will be 2 to 3 proposals selected for funding, so you won't be alone, and plan ahead for collaboration and at least talking to the other projects. So we want to see that reflected in the proposal. It doesn't need to be very precise, but just be aware that you won't be evolving in a vacuum. That's what we want to insist on. So now to get into the flesh of the subject, the topics themselves. You will see that the first 2 topics sound at first glance quite similar. They are both dealing with foreign information manipulation and interference, but they are in fact not that similar. So please pay attention to that. The first one is detecting, analyzing, and countering foreign information manipulation and interference, FIMI, for 9 million euros. So with that budget, we're expecting to fund 3 proposals. That will be true for almost all of the topics I will present in this webinar. So FIMI, so foreign interference and manipulation, foreign information manipulation and interference, sorry, is a key global challenge. It requires understanding about how it works. So by foreign interference, we mean, for instance, foreign powers interfering in elections or spreading disinformation on social media that are read by Europeans, these kind of things. So to understand how it works, we need to have a thorough understanding of the tactics, techniques, and procedures, which are acronymized as TTPs, so that governments can impose costs and break the supply chain for manipulated information. So how to prevent the spread of manipulated information, how to break the way it's presented to citizens. There are other forms of foreign interference like elite capture, foreign direct investment, threats of armed attacks as means of influence, and that's also in the scope of this topic. What we are expecting is a multidisciplinary coverage, and we also would like you to look at what's happening in Cluster 3. So Cluster 3 is on civil security. They have topics on disinformation, on corruption. Have a look. Especially there is a topic that was published in 2021 on disinformation and fake news are combated and trust in the digital world is raised. So have a look at this one. It's Cluster 3 2021 topic 0103. It's in the call text, so don't worry. And there is also an ongoing project which is very interesting to look into. It's EU HypeNet. So again, that's not insider information. That's in the call text, in the work program. Just have a look and see how you can use that information in your proposal. In terms of expected outcomes, what we want is, of course, to protect democracies from foreign interference, while, very important, while preserving fundamental rights and freedoms. So not sliding into some sort of surveillance states or something like that. We also want to increase the ability of states, mostly to detect, analyze, and counter FIMI attempts by better understanding the techniques, tactics, and procedures that are put in place, and develop a solution space for policymakers, private stakeholders, and civil society to counter FIMI and increase resilience to it. So how can we improve the efficiency of solutions? How can we find solutions that work, but while mitigating the negative side effects? So once again, this idea of preserving fundamental rights and freedoms. And finally, we want to improve the normative understanding of the tensions between the value of a free, pluralistic, and democratic society versus FIMI versus domestic anti-democratic forces that sometimes benefit from this FIMI, from this disinformation. So yes, try and make us, well, we want you to make us understand better the behavioral and societal effects of these FIMI attempts. Now the second topic on foreign information manipulation and interference, developing a better understanding of information suppression by state authorities as an example of FIMI. So here, it's not actually that similar to the previous topic because we're really focusing on information suppression by state authorities. So that's more focused, so to speak, than the first topic. Again, we're looking at multidisciplinary approaches to work on a conceptual definition of information suppression, including the domestic side of it and the cross-border dimension. So information suppression by the state at home and information suppression by states outside of their borders. We want to have a compendium of TTPs that are used to suppress information by different actors, and focusing on the aspects from individuals in society. So suppressing dissident voices in society, in the media, in academia, as well as pressure on the private industry and private companies. And we would like also that you examine how diaspora communities are used as vectors for information suppression. In terms of outcomes, we would like to have a better understanding of how authoritarian states use information suppression and the TTPs in their foreign policy and information manipulation actions. We would like very much policy recommendations on how to detect and address this phenomenon, and how to better understand, again, how to protect fundamental rights and freedoms from the threats stemming from this information suppression. So synergies are expected not only with the previous topic, so that's why with cluster 2, but also with cluster 3. And in particular, a relevant topic that was published in 21, again, is the same one. So disinformation and fake news are combated and trust in the digital world is raised. So for the third topic out of 8, new approaches for combating corruption and other undue influences on political decision-making. So this is a very timely topic, as you probably have heard and read. The scope is that corruption and undue influence bear not only economic consequences, but also erode trust in governance. So citizens don't trust governments if they see that there is a corruption scandal that's erupting, and it fuels populist narratives. This is exactly what's unfolding at the moment that I speak. Just to say that this topic is 12 million euros in terms of budget, and we only expect to fund 2 projects. So this is the only one where this budget and division is planned for. This is because we are looking at big projects that look like a project that we've already funded and under FP7, and that was called Anticorp. So if you can, I highly recommend you to have a look at Anticorp, see what they did, and bear in mind that this is something similar that we're looking into in terms of organization. But again, this is in the topic text, so this is no additional information on my part. For this topic, we have 6 areas of interest. We want you to look at the cross-border character of corruption, integrity and effective models for integrity management in public and private sectors, the role of data analytics and its sector to influence and disrupt politics, the role played by investigative journalism in strengthening accountability. We want you to carry a critical analysis of social representations of corruption and look at how the media and education have an impact on how corruption is socially constructed. In terms of expected outcomes, we want to have stronger and more resilient legislative tools at EU level for preventing and fighting corruption. We would like to have advanced knowledge on the use of technologies to prevent and detect corruption and other undue political influence in the EU and its neighborhood, important. And we would like increased knowledge and data on political corruption and its impact on the citizens' understanding of democracy and the rule of law. So for this topic, international cooperation is encouraged, especially with the neighborhood countries. Again, we're looking for a multidisciplinary approach and synergies with cluster 3 where you have topics on corruption, especially one that was published in 2022 on effective fight against corruption. The fourth topic is the emotional politics of democracies. So what is the role of emotions in political debates and debates about democracy? So here, think about a family dinner at Christmas where you start talking about politics and people get emotional about it because it's something that touches people's heart. Think about how people interact on social media when they're talking about politics. So what we want to understand is how do emotions interact with identities, values, beliefs, and how then does that impact democracies? What role is there for affect in European democracies, and how do the changing emotional landscapes and feeling rules, display norms, and shifts in popular feelings interact with practices of democratic politics? So how do people's emotions towards different issues or spanning from their own self-identification impact the way that they interact with the democratic processes? In terms of outcome from this research, what we would like is to have better informed decision-making thanks to a better understanding of the interaction between emotions, values, identities, experiences, and beliefs, and for that to inform decision-making and how it impacts democratic governance. We would also like recommendations on how to improve communication of evidence-based policies so that they resonate with citizens. So taking account the emotions that communication well done can suscitate. And we also wish for a better integration of the emotional dimension of politics in the policies to foster and promote European democracies and values, and boost trust in governance through a better attention towards the needs, the emotional needs of citizens. So for this topic, we also recommend international cooperation and multidisciplinarity. So the case studies can include countries outside of the European Union and outside of associated countries, but that should be with the idea to shed some light on cases inside the Union, so by means of comparison. So the fifth topic is on the climate imperative and its impact on democratic governance. Again, the budget is 9 million and we're expecting to fund 3 projects. So the challenge here is that the policies that have to be adopted to tackle climate change are not pain-free, and it's not comfortable for people. It will be disruptive to the lifestyle of a large segment of society, and it also the long-term perspective of climate change is also a challenge for short-termist politicians. So how do we reconciliate the need for action with the need for action in a democratic and inclusive way? How can we tackle urgent climate goals while respecting democratic processes? And the fact that we are fighting against climate change, or trying to mitigate it rather, also highlighted deficiencies of governance at supranational level. So we want you to look into that, as well as to devise some new ways, some innovative ways for civic participation in this existential policy area. So in terms of outcomes, we want to improve the ability of democratic governance to address complex long-term challenges while ensuring a better mobilization and engagement and communication with citizens on climate-related policies, especially. And we want recommendations to address the climate imperative in a democratic manner that's supported by citizens, as well as to understand better the supranational challenges of the climate crisis. So how to coordinate better action at supranational level. So for this topic, we encourage you to look at social innovation activities and to devise some to try and draw inspiration from that, and to look at potential synergies with other clusters of Horizon Europe partnerships that were concluded under this framework program, for instance, the clean energy transition, as well as missions and funding instruments. So looking at synergies, what we mean is that, again, once again, you are not evolving in a vacuum. There's a lot going on, trying to tackle climate change in a democratic way. Just have a look at what's already going on in other parts of Horizon Europe and see where you could find complementarities, synergies. Maybe get in touch with people who are conducting projects under the clean energy transition or in the missions. Well, the idea is really to say, you're not alone. This is a resource for you. Just gather ideas and put them in your proposal. The sixth topic is democratic governance for times of disruptive change to the social contract. So for this topic, with the rise and increasing of social and economic inequalities, with the green and the digital transitions, we have calls for a new social contract at national, EU, and global level. So what we want you to look at is, why are some social contracts more effective than others, and what are the factors that contribute to the success? And we would like you to use approaches that are either narrative or data-driven or computer-based, or both. Mixed approaches are also fine. So really, you're free to do pretty much what you want. In terms of outcomes, we need a better understanding of ways to account for the need for changing the social contracts in the member states. And we would like to propose safeguards and mechanisms that are needed when revisiting the very foundation of the social contract. So to make sure that everything is right and square and democratic. And you should also come up with scenarios for how new social contracts could look like, as well as approaches for developing narratives for these scenarios. So mix of approaches and focus on EU member states. You can use also international cooperation, for comparison purposes. To the seventh topic, the one before last, is intersectionality and equality in deliberative and participatory democratic spaces. There's a recent push to overcome the limits of representative democracy by using democratic participation at more direct levels. So participatory and deliberative democratic innovations are taking place at local, regional, national, and European level. You have seen these citizens' assemblies, citizens' panels, the Conference on the Future of Europe, but that's also happening at local, regional, and national level. However, the problem is that there are still difficulties as to the meaningful involvement of minorities and marginalized communities. And meaningful is really key here. The question is, how can we make majority populations and non-marginalized communities more understanding and more tolerant towards the so-called perceived others, so that they have a chance to express themselves freely in these democratic fora. So in terms of expected outcomes for this topic, we want more inclusive participatory processes. Everyone has the right to express their voice. So how can we improve them by including an intersectional approach that allows for accounting for power relations at all process of the design of these actions or events? We want you to understand deliberative and participatory democratic practices through an intersectional lens that engages with structures of power. And finally, we want you to pilot innovative designs for citizens' engagement that consider intersectionality and allow for other types of participation and deliberation. Again, for this topic, have a look at social innovation and how it can help you, how you can devise some social innovations yourself. You might want to have a look at the role of digital technologies and how they can help making deliberative and participatory democratic actions more inclusive, and make use, obviously, of past results of projects that have been carried out. Last topic, but not least, political perspectives for the Eastern neighborhood and the Western Balkans. So this topic was really devised with the war going on in Ukraine in mind, because the consequences of the war go beyond the Ukrainian border. And at the same time, the influence of countries like Russia, China is growing in some candidate countries to the Union as well. So this opens really crucial questions about the EU's enlargement strategy that require not only political answers, but also academic reflection. So we basically need to strengthen the mechanisms of compliance as well with the acquis and the social policies to strengthen social cohesion and avoid brain drain and care drain in the Eastern Partnership and the Western Balkan countries. In terms of expected outcomes, we want to improve the EU's neighborhood policy and accession process. We want you to forecast to produce forecasts and scenarios of the geopolitical ambitions of Russia, of China, and other countries towards the countries of the Eastern neighborhood and accession candidates. And we want to strengthen the resilience of the foreign policy arsenal of the Union against military threats on the European continent. So for this topic, pay attention. This is particular. You have to have in your consortium at least one member based in either Ukraine or Georgia or Moldova. It's not compulsory to have the three of them, but you have to have on board a partner who is based in one of these three countries. You also have to involve stakeholders from the countries in scope in your proposal. And if you hire a Ukrainian researcher with a refugee status, that is an asset. That's a plus. It's not compulsory, but it's a plus. International cooperation is strongly encouraged. And again, we encourage you to use the results of previous projects to connect with ongoing projects in Horizon Europe, Horizon 20, as well as Global Europe. So in terms of budget, for this year, we have 75 million euros on 8 research and innovation actions. Next year, so the work program 2024 was published at the same time as the work program 2023. If you are thinking about applying next year, have a look at the topics already and start drafting your application as soon as you can. There are 11 research and innovation actions and one CSA. Coordination and support action. So you have topics on protest politics, identity politics, digital and climate transitions, political participation, gender roles in political extremism. We also are looking for future scenarios and forecasts, looking at digital democracy, and the CSA is on testing and piloting research results. So that's a pilot topic, the first time we're actually doing it, a CSA on how can we use the research results and test them and implement them. So that's a bit of a taster for next year. Now, in most of the topics of this year, the participation of the Joint Research Center is possible. What does that mean? So first of all, what is the Joint Research Center? For those who don't know, the JRC is one of the Commission's Directorate Generals, and they're really focusing on scientific advice. So it's populated by scientists who carry out research in order to inform and support EU policies, but it's independent research. So why or how can you involve the JRC in your proposal if you so wish? This is not compulsory. So if you want to have the JRC on board, so they can participate, but they will not get funding, obviously, because they are a DG of the Commission. It's not compulsory to include them, and if you don't, it will not impact negatively the evaluation. If you do want to work with the JRC, then you must include it in your proposal. Can get in touch with JRC scientists about how they can participate in your proposal, and be mindful that all communications between the JRC and applicants will be made public for the sake of transparency and equal opportunities for all. So obviously, if you don't include the GRC in your proposal, they will not participate in your project if you get funded. So you cannot change your mind if you are successful. If you are selected for funding, then the proposal that's already said that they wanted to work with the GRC, then we'll discuss with the GRC after being selected to work out the details of their participation. And only if you find an agreement, then the GRC is part of the consortium. If there is no agreement, then the GRC drops out, so it's not part of the project, and that's okay as long as the project still holds without the GRC being present. So that's the same rule as for normal partners in a consortium. So I just wanted to make that clear because it's I think the first time that we have so many topics with participation from the GRC that's optional. Very important, the deadline to apply is the 14th of March at 5 p.m. Brussels time. 5 p.m. Brussels time. So be careful of that. Put reminders. If you pass the deadline, that's cooked. That's done. Some tips from my side. When you prepare your proposal, read the core text very carefully. Every word counts. We have spent month and month on these texts, and that's for a reason. Every word counts. Read very carefully. Also read the general introduction of Horizon Europe and the general annexes. Those are the legally binding documents. There's a lot of information in there about how to devise your proposal, what's important to put in there, not only for the scientific part, but also the more administrative parts. So have a look, read very carefully. Second tip, start early. Start now if you haven't already to write your proposal, to get in touch with the potential partners. It's important to start early because there is a very short window on which to write your proposal and then submit it. Third advice, do not draft online directly on the online form. It sounds perhaps a bit silly, but please do not do it. Keep a local copy, write it by hand if you want, or use a Drive or a Cloud, I don't know, but do not draft it directly in the application form because there's always problems with timeouts or poor connection, or your draft wasn't saved properly, you have to start anew. So please, 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 be careful, use a local copy or anything else that is not the online form for application. And fourth advice, again, pretty obvious, but submit before the deadline. If you can, submit even the day before, because everybody will try and submit at the same time at 5 p.m. Brussels time, and the network will jam. So if you want to ensure that you submit your proposal and then you can breathe and have a glass of whatever you like to celebrate, then submit before the deadline, if possible the day before, or at least the same morning, so the 14th of March. If you need help with your proposal, there are resources that are ready for you. This is one of the webinars that we have produced for this work program 2023. There are many others that are available on the same page of the Info Days about how to write a successful proposal, how to integrate the gender dimension, what are lump sums, all kinds of more or less technical subjects. You can find information on those. You can also watch them, the recordings from previous years under Horizon Europe. Of course, Horizon 2020, there have been some changes, so I wouldn't recommend that you watch those videos, but that's there for you to help you. If you have more targeted questions, have a look at the Research Inquiry Service on the Funding and Tenders portal. There is an FAQ section, so if you have questions, people may have already thought about this before, and all of the questions that are submitted through this Research Inquiry Service are posted then in the FAQ. So you can have a look at what already is there in terms of questions and answers. And if you have a new question that hasn't been treated, you can submit it and you will receive a reply. Finally, the network of national contact points is there to help you. There is in every member state national contact point. They are there to help. They have been trained by us to answer questions about the topics. So do not hesitate to look up for their reference and to make use of them. And if you want to follow us on social media, you are very welcome to do so. We are on Twitter. Here are the hashtags and handles. We're also on Facebook, on YouTube, on Instagram, you name it. And if you want the latest news, hashtag Horizon EU. On that note, I wish you good luck. Crossing fingers for you. Start putting your proposal together now if you haven't already. And enjoy the rest of the day. Goodbye.